Hello colleagues, this is John Herrera, President of Munitemps Municipal Staffing Solutions, and with today's City Speak blog and podcast article, Volatile Economic Times Call for Quarterly Financial and Budget Reporting. These are truly volatile financial times, are they not? For those of you on LinkedIn, you will get the 10-minute version, and because LinkedIn only allows 10 minutes. And those of you that want more details, stay on for the additional 20 minutes right after the end of this 10-minute portion. But yes, today I think there's no disputing that we have volatile economic times. And because of volatile economic times, we really need to be, as organizations, need to be providing financial reporting, budget reporting that is more frequent than just at the mid-year budget point or the end of the year. Business, government, and nonprofit organizations all have the same financial constraints. And more than ever in this time of economic volatility, we need to be bringing forward, whether it's to the governing body, the city council, the board of directors, whether you're in government, nonprofit, or business, more frequent reporting, because we need to be able to catch the indicators. Some economic indicators are lagging indicators, and some are leading indicators, so that we can make adjustments in our spending and in our financial planning in a timely fashion. We've learned a lot of lessons in how to manage our organizations financially, fiscally, economically during times of economic uncertainty, have we not? The most recent economic downturn that we had to deal with was back in 2008, 2009 during the great financial recession. And so the lessons that we learned is that we need to be more nimble in making a turn in the organization, in our spending plans, in our budgeting, in our financial forecasting, in our cash flow management, so that we can try to minimize the impact on the organization financially, fiscally, economically. There are, as I said, lagging indicators and leading indicators that tell us that it's time to pay attention to what's going on in our organization's cash flows, revenues, and expenditures. You know, I mostly work with local government organizations, city government, special districts, and so forth. And what we do is we look at the budget. The budget is basically a spending plan that estimates the revenues for the next fiscal year, in some cases 2 fiscal years, as well as the expenditure side and what we're going to spend during the next fiscal year or the next 2 fiscal years if you adopt a 2-year budget. But in most of the cities that I worked at, the top 5 revenue funding sources typically make up between 70 to 80% of the funding for the general fund, for example. And obviously there's multiple funding sources within the general fund, but there's also separately legally required funding sources that we have to track for the special revenue funds, capital projects fund, debt service funds, the enterprise funds, internal service funds, fiduciary funds, different fund types. So really, all you really have to do these more frequent financial reports for your organizations is to look at using the 80-20 rule, focus on the top 5 revenues. Those typically account for 70 to 80% of the revenues. So the whole point of this City Speak podcast, which I'm doing from my hotel room in Los Angeles County, but is to understand that most organizations, whether they're business or government, are already doing more frequent reporting of their finances. Some organizations, like business organizations, especially those that are publicly traded, they have a requirement by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, to be providing what are called 10Q reports, which are once every 3 months. They also file 10K reports, which are once every year. Well, government has similar reporting. In government, we do a mid-year budget, which is once every 6 months, and we do an annual comprehensive financial report, which is financial statements once a year. But what I'm proposing is that you consider what other cities, other local governments are doing out there, and that is doing a quarterly budget report. So that's why I say volatile economic times call for quarterly financial and budget reporting, because it's more important than ever. We have the stock market that goes up and down, swings very wildly. We have monetary policy of the Federal Reserve Bank that is impacting even our bond markets. Right now there is a flight to safety. A lot of people, investors, are taking the money out of the stock market and moving it into the bond market. A lot of senior citizens, a lot of older people that never paid attention to the bond market because it wasn't that exciting, because you weren't making much in the way of interest earnings, investment earnings over the last 10, 15 years. Nobody paid attention. Very few people paid attention to the bond market, but more and more people today. It's called the flight to safety for investors, and more are moving their money into certificates of deposit up to $250,000 that's secured by the FDIC, investing in the U.S. Treasury bills, U.S. Treasury notes, U.S. Treasury bonds. Although most of us are investing in U.S. Treasuries no more than 24 months out in the maturity. But with this flight to safety, there's a need to be doing more frequent financial reports. The publicly traded companies out there and private businesses, they present the reports to the owners, the shareholders, the board of directors. In government, we present them to the governing body, the city council, and other governing bodies of local government. So I urge you to consider Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 reports. Q1, if your fiscal year ending June 30th, your first quarter for your new fiscal year is going to be July, August, September, and you should bring that forward to the council. If you're a local government, bring it forward in maybe not September, July, August, September, you'd bring it in October, November. And then Q2 is for October, November, December. You bring that forward in January. And then the third quarter of the fiscal year is for January, February, March. You normally bring that forward in April. And then the last quarter of the fiscal year is for April, May, and June. And you should bring that forward probably around August of the next year. Why do I say August? Well, because you're closing the fiscal year. You're trying to post as many of the invoices and record the accruals for revenues and expenditures ending June 30th during the month of July and August. So you should try to bring forward a quarterly financial report to your city council or other governing body by August, if possible. Keep in mind that the annual comprehensive financial report, the ACFR, that local governments typically bring forward, that typically doesn't make it to the city council until December or even January of the next year, so 6 or 7 months later. So that's why the Q4 quarterly financial report is so important. So I urge you, finance directors, CFOs, and local government especially, obligate yourselves to do quarterly reporting. You'll see that actually makes your life a lot easier in monitoring your budget. You get to do a lot of housekeeping on the budget. You get to fix the authorized positions in the budget if you made any mistakes, and the city manager is able to have more flexibility in being able to manage the authorized positions on the personnel budget, contract services, other portions of the budget. So you'll be happy as a municipal finance officer, as an organization, if you do that. So again, volatile economic times like we have right now in 2023, it calls for quarterly budget reporting, quarterly financial reporting, and I urge you to do that. All for now. For the LinkedIn section of this report, John Herrera with Munitemps. Please comment. I'd love to hear back from you. For those of you that are staying for the second half, please stick around. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to stay here. In about 6 or 7 seconds, we go into the longer term version. I'll come right back to it. Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, very good. For those of you that stayed with me for the second half, I want to go into a little more details with regard to volatile economic times. Calls for quarterly budget reporting, quarterly financial reporting. Let me go back to the beginning again. As I said, business, government, and nonprofits, all of us are very concerned right now. There's a lot of economic indicators. There are leading indicators as well as lagging indicators that we're watching very closely. I'm monitoring my cash flows daily. I have a dashboard for all of the city governments that I work with. I have a dashboard where I track cash every day. I look at the bank reconciliation as of the end of the month for the prior month, and then I daily go into the bank and monitor all the activity that hits the bank through the disbursements and the receipts, through accounts payable, payroll, utility billing, business licensing, miscellaneous receivables, and all types of cash transactions that hit the bank. So in these volatile economic times, especially when interest rates are going up again, where you need to be monitoring your cash, you need to watch your cash. You need to have a dashboard. It's like a cash register. So daily you know where you stand. It's almost like doing a daily bank reconciliation. So by the time you get to the end of the month, it's no big deal. But I, as a CFO, as a finance director, I'm very interested in knowing how we're doing in our cash every day, not just on a monthly basis, but every day. And then that helps me then to better track and report on our revenues and our expenditures, not at mid-year, but on a quarterly basis, not at the end of the year where it's meaningless, but on a quarterly basis. So let me just talk briefly about lessons that we learned during the last great financial recession, the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. There's different terms for it, but we had a humongous issue that happened. I really don't look at the COVID recession because that really wasn't caused by economics. That really was more caused by COVID and the pandemic, where the whole world shut down. And we had up to 30% losses in revenues and more than that. So I really look at the last real recession was in 2008, 2009, the Great Financial Recession, where due to all the loose lending policies, mortgages, and so forth, the United States economy got into a really bad situation. Remember the Lehman Brothers that defaulted in September, I think it was September of 2008, that just caused a domino effect. Well, something like that could happen again. And I'm not saying that to make anybody panic. I'm only saying it so you can prepare. And that you can be, the way you prepare is by doing quarterly financial and budget reporting for the City Council. As I said, there are 4 quarters, right? We need to prepare reports for. Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4. Quarter 1, for most of the local governments that I work with, they have a fiscal year that ends on June 30th. So the new fiscal year, the quarter 1, is for July, August, September. That quarterly report we usually do in August or September. The next quarterly report, Q2, is for October, November, December. And we typically do that. Q2 is like the mid-year budget review that we normally do in January of the next year, looking back over the last 6 months. Not just the last 3 months, but the last 6 months. Q3, as for January, February, and March, and we typically will present that to the City Council in April. Then lastly, I'm repeating myself here, but it's important to remember, the April, May, and June quarter 4 of the fiscal year we bring back to the Council, not in July, but usually like in August or maybe even September. Why do I say that? Because, as I said earlier, we need to make sure that we post all the invoices that pertain to the prior fiscal year. So in Q4, right, during the April, May, and June, which we work during July and August, retrospectively and retroactively post invoices that pertain to the prior year, and we do that during July and August. So normally we're ready to bring forward a Q4, a quarterly financial report to the City Council, the governing body, in September, August or September, depending on our cutoff. Let me go back and look at the fourth quarter, for the 4 quarters again. Why is the first quarter so important? It's only for July, August, September. But the reason why that's so important is because we're very busy in doing the closing of the books for the prior fiscal year that ended on June 30th. During July, August, September, we're typically doing the audit of the prior year's budget, the prior year's financial statements. So during July, August, September, a lot of cities tend to forget about the quarterly reporting. So if you can still run a report for the new fiscal year that began on July 1 for the July, August, September revenues and expenditures, then you can present a report during the month of July, September, October. You do that report. That's Q1. Then October, November, December activity, you will present that to the council as a Q2 report, also known as the mid-year budget. You do that during January. The Q3 report for January, February, March, you present during April. And lastly, as I said before, the Q4 for the month of April, May, and June, you will need a couple months so that you can then present it in August, late August, or first meeting in September, so that the city council can be made aware of what happened, not just in the fourth quarter of the last fiscal year, but the entire 4 quarters, the entire fiscal year, because the Q4 report is really like an annual financial report, but not audited. Keep in mind that the audit happens during July, August, September. Financial statements are prepared, and the annual comprehensive financial report happens during October, November, December. And if you as a city, a municipality, present your financial statements, your annual comprehensive financial report to the Government Finance Office Association, the GFOA, for an award, Excellence in Financial Reporting, you have to submit by December 31st, within 6 months of the end of the fiscal year. So you should be able to present that to your city council as well. As a matter of fact, you should present to your city council during December if they have a council meeting. But again, that's why it's so important. I mean, you can't take it for granted, the fact that most city governments really only present financial information, the budget updates to their governing bodies, city council, in January for the mid-year budget. And then the next time they look at it will be sometime in January of the prior year. So there's usually about 12 months of no financial reporting that happens in a city government. Really look at it. You present a mid-year budget in January, and then you don't do any other financial reporting until January of the next year, when you're presenting the annual audit to the city council. This is why the quarterly budget reporting, quarterly financial reporting during these volatile economic times is so important. We need to see the numbers, focusing in on the top 5 revenues in the general fund and the various revenues that are susceptible to economic impacts. The sales tax is a lot more impacted more quickly. Those are typically leading economic indicators, whereas the property tax takes a year or longer before the changes in real estate values impact the property taxes. That tends to be like a lagging economic indicator. So, but then we have other building permits. I mean, those are typically very indicative, right? And right now there's a lot of conflicting financial information that anybody will tell you. It makes it very difficult for local governments to see what's going on. You know, in the end, I have a city manager. Yeah, hi Rick, hi Raul. If you guys are watching this, Rick, my city manager, asked me the question, John, is our budget in balance? And I said, well, you know, right now we're currently building our budget for next fiscal year, the 2024 fiscal year. Some cities are building a 2-year budget, which is for fiscal year 2024 and 2025. But Rick, my city manager, asked me, he says, John, is the budget going to be in balance? And I said, well, let's look at the budget calendar. You know, the budget for the new fiscal year, the new 2 fiscal year, whether it's 2-year budget or 1-year budget, the budget calendar, as I've said before, is the most important management tool that the city manager and the finance department and all the directors working together spend their time doing, and that is during the month of January, February, March, April, May, and June is when we prepare the budget for adoption on or before June 30th. Then July, August, September, October, November, December of the next year is when we do the audit of the prior year budget. And again, the quarterly budget is happening throughout all this. So we have the budget preparation cycle, then we have the audit of the budget cycle and the books, and then the quarterly financial reporting. Boy, I feel like Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off. At any rate, the quarterly budget reporting, the quarterly financial reporting is happening over these 6 months of the year, preparation of the next year's budget, and the next 6 months of the year, retroactively looking backwards. So we're, again, just trying to show you why it's so important that we do this quarterly financial reporting. Half of the fiscal year, financially, half of the fiscal year we spend it looking prospectively, forecasting into the future. And then the next half of the year, we're looking retrospectively, looking back over the last, not just the last 6 months, but the last 12 months. But we spend 6 months of the fiscal year looking forward as we prepare the forecast for next year. Then the next 6 months of the new fiscal year, we spend looking back into what we've done in the prior year. But the quarterly financial reporting, the quarterly budget reporting, what that allows you to do is to continue to have every 3 months a quarterly financial report to your city council, while this 6 month window looking forward and the 6 month window looking backward is going on. You have to tell the financial story. No surprises. Nobody likes surprises. We all get cranky, right? City council doesn't like that. If you present a budget that's a balanced budget. So Rick, are we going to have a budget? I'll let you know when we get to May. Remember that budget calendar that I've talked about in the past in my City Speak podcast? There's 6 months of budget building work that we do. That budget calendar spells it out. January, we do all of our planning work. February, we do all of our training, budget training with departments. March, all the departments are preparing the budget request for the next year. April, Finance validates all the numbers and meets with departments to validate the numbers. May, that's when we finalize all the revenue estimates. We know the state revenue, state subventions, our consultant HDL and other consultants that help us with verifying sales tax, property tax, and our big ticket items as that happens during May. And that's when we really find out if we have a balanced budget or not. That happens in May. And then in June, we do our public hearings and our community input to build the budget for final adoption by the governing body, City Council, on or before the 30th of June for the next year. But as I've said before, in business, especially the publicly traded companies that are subject to the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, they have to do a 10K report, an annual financial summary of the financial statements, right? But they also have to do a 10Q report, and that's a quarterly report, also submitted to the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, if it's a publicly traded company. In local government, city government, I only work with, by the way, you know there's 3 levels of government, right? Local government, state government, and federal government. I only work with local government, city government, special districts, and related local government agencies. But in this reporting that we have with local governments has always historically been only once a year that we review the financial results for the budget. It's typically at mid-year. Everything is the focus. When are we going to get mid-year done? Well, what about the rest of the year? There's 4 quarters. Mid-year is just the second quarter of the fiscal year. Remember? July, September, October, November, December, January, March, April, May, June. 4 quarters. So mid-year is the only time that you review it, and you do it around January. And the only other time that you look at the budget and the results of the finances of the organization for your local government is January of the following year, when the annual comprehensive financial report, the audited financial statements, are presented. So that, to me, that's not satisfactory, especially in these volatile economic times that we're living in right now. Guys, we got to get ready. We should be doing quarterly financial reporting. Talk to your city manager. Talk to your chief executive. Work on coming forward before the city council. There's a lot of city councils that get bored. Oh, they just start yawning. They start wanting coffee. And they're not really always interested in seeing the financial results. But you have to remind them it's their stewardship, their fiscal stewardship responsibilities as city council. So you got to bring forward these financial reports. Nobody likes talking about the finances of the organization. Everybody gets bored with it. I apologize for all the noise going on here. I'm in a hotel. It's a public place, but I hope you can still hear my presentation. I think it's very important that during these volatile economic times that we be doing quarterly financial reporting, and hopefully I'm able to hopefully I'm not talking about anything that you don't already know. Let me talk about financial reports that you bring to the council, okay? Everybody knows about the budget. In local government, everybody knows about the budget. How much is coming in, how much is going out, how much we have in the bank. The budget deals with revenues and expenditures. In the private sector, they call that the income statement. Revenues and expenses equals the net revenue, right? Positive or negative. But the budget versus the balance sheet, nobody speaks about the balance sheet. Few people know about the balance sheet. Sometimes I even talk to a finance officer, finance director, an accountant, and I ask them questions about the balance sheet. They don't know because they don't spend a lot of time with the balance sheet. The balance sheet is typically something they say, oh, the auditors worry about that. That's when we do the financial statements. Most finance department staff, they think about the balance sheet as a financial statement that the auditors look at, even though they forget that the financial statements belong to who? The financial statements belong to the auditors or to management, the CFO, the finance director. Well, obviously they don't belong to the finance director. As a matter of fact, the city council, the city auditor, because the auditor, in their audit opinion letter, they say these financial statements are the responsibility of the city's management, which is the finance director, the CFO. So remember, you got to learn your balance sheet. You got to see what's on your balance sheet. Remember, the budget deals with revenues and expenditures. Those are pretty easy to look at. But the balance sheet deals with assets and liabilities. Assets, right, the receivables and other assets, and liabilities, the payables and other liabilities. So I urge you, get to know what's on your balance sheet. You don't want to wait until these volatile economic times result in a major economic downturn. Your cash balances start coming down and your solvency of your organization is affected. Liquidity, you've got to maintain liquidity in your organization. And you can only know that is if you have a balance sheet, review of the balance sheet, and you really should do that at the time that you do your quarterly financial report. Anyways, budget, revenues and expenditures, balance sheet, assets and liabilities. How many of you think about that? You should be doing that as part of your quarterly financial review. I guess I would summarize by just a quick recap. Volatile economic times calls for quarterly budget reporting, quarterly financial reporting to your city council and other board of directors or other governing body. You need to do this so you can plan ahead, make adjustments in spending, and be more nimble to turn that ship around as a city organization. These are times that we don't want to get caught by surprise. I think it's Warren Buffett that talks about when the tide goes out, we see who's wearing shorts or not, right? And so the quarterly financial reporting gives you a leg up on everybody else out there who may not be advanced preparing for what could come with an economic downturn. I'm not asking you to panic, and I urge you not to panic, but a prepared person is worth two, as my grandfather used to say. So prepare for what could happen. Plan for the worst and accept the best if it happens that way. So again, this is John Herrera, president of Munitemps Municipal Staffing Solutions and the City Speak blog podcast. Thanking you for being with me for the longer term version. And I urge you to reach out to me. I love talking about this stuff, economics, finance, city budgets, financial statements, financial analysis, forecasting, multi-year financial planning, and of course, investing. Right now, you need to take your idle cash balances and invest them out there. You're making 4 and 5% risk-free. Invest money in certificates of deposit up to the insured limit. Otherwise, fly to safety and go to the treasurydirect.gov. You can go out there and invest the city's idle cash balances. And I urge you to continue to look at quarterly financial reporting. Thank you.